On a cold February night in 1978, five young men from Yuba City, California, drove into the Sierra Nevada foothills and never returned. Days later, their car was discovered abandoned on a remote, snow-covered mountain road. Months passed before the first bodies were found, some decomposed, one preserved in a trailer under chilling circumstances. One of the five was never located. This bizarre and tragic case became known as the mystery of the Yuba County Five. To some, it's been compared to the Dyatlov Pass incident, a 1959 Soviet case where 9 hikers died under eerie and unexplained conditions in the Ural Mountains. Both cases share threads of sudden disappearance, exposure to brutal cold, and a trail of incomplete evidence that only deepens the mystery. But unlike Dyatlov, the Yuba County Five weren't outdoorsmen. They were fans of basketball and Big Macs. They lived with various mental health challenges, and they weren't supposed to be anywhere near a snowbound mountain that night. So why were they there? Theories range from misadventure to foul play, from paranoia to something more sinister. The facts are unsettling. The gaps in logic are vast, and the evidence left behind suggests not chaos, but calm, tragic intention, or fear. This is not a story of ghosts or legends. It's a true account of 5 men who entered the woods and never came back the same, if they came back at all. Welcome to the case of the Yuba County Five, sometimes called the American Dyatlov. Before they became a mystery, they were simply friends. The 5 men at the heart of this case were Gary Mathias, Jack Madruga, William Bill Sterling, Theodore Ted Weiher, and Jack Hewitt. All lived in or near Yuba City, a quiet agricultural town in Northern California. They were close, not just in age, but in experience. 4 of the 5 had mild intellectual disabilities or psychiatric conditions. They were known to their families as gentle, good-natured, and routine-oriented. Each lived with parents or relatives and relied heavily on structure in their daily lives. Jack Madruga, 30, was a high school graduate and Army veteran. He was quiet and responsible, with a deep love for driving. He owned the car they took that night, a 1969 Mercury Montego. Bill Sterling, 29, was deeply religious and Madruga's best friend. He spent much of his free time at the library or volunteering at a local hospital. Ted Weiher, 32, was known for his friendly, talkative nature. Though he struggled with developmental delays, he worked part-time and lived a highly structured life. Jack Hewitt, 24, was the youngest. He was deeply attached to his mother and had a playful, trusting demeanor. Gary Mathias, 25, stood out slightly. He had served in the Army but was honorably discharged due to schizophrenia. Under treatment and medication, he had been doing well and was considered stable. Unlike the others, he had experienced the world beyond Yuba. They were often referred to endearingly as the boys, though all were men. What united them was their participation in a special needs basketball team sponsored by a local program for the mentally disabled. On the night they disappeared, they were excited. They had a big game coming up, a special Olympic-style tournament scheduled for the next day in Sacramento. But they never made it. For their families, the disappearance made no sense. These were men who avoided the cold, stuck to routines, and disliked unfamiliar places. So why did they drive 70 miles away from home, into the mountains, on a freezing winter night? It was Friday, February 24th, 1978. That evening, the 5 men piled into Jack Madruga's turquoise and white Mercury Montego. Their plan was simple: drive 50 miles south to Chico State University to watch a basketball game. The UC Davis team was playing. The men were enthusiastic basketball fans, and the trip was a reward before their own game the next day. The group made it to Chico without incident. At around 10 p.m., the game ended. They stopped briefly at a nearby store. A clerk would later confirm selling them snacks, Hostess pies, milk, and soda. Then they were gone. By Saturday morning, their families were already worried. The men were expected home that night, and missing their own basketball game the next day was unthinkable. When no one heard from them, calls were made. By Sunday, police had opened a missing persons investigation. On Monday, the Mercury Montego was found. It had been abandoned on a narrow, winding road in the Plumas National Forest. Not south, but northeast, about 70 miles from Chico. This was high-altitude wilderness, deep in snow and far off course. The location made no sense. The road was rough, unpaved, and steep. In winter, it was nearly impassable without chains or snow tires. The Montego had neither. Yet there were no signs the car had been stuck or forced off the road. Investigators noted that Jack Madruga, protective of his car, would never willingly drive it into such terrain. The car's doors were unlocked. One window was rolled down. The keys were missing. There was fuel in the tank. Nothing inside the vehicle was broken or disturbed. It was as if the five had simply driven into the mountains, parked the car, and walked away into freezing temperatures in the middle of the night. There was no obvious reason for them to be in that location. No family members could imagine any scenario where the group would voluntarily detour into a snow-covered wilderness, especially when they were due at their own game the following morning. From that moment on, the story of the Yuba County Five shifted from concern to mystery. The Mercury Montego was found just past the snow line, about 4,400 feet up in the Plumas National Forest. It sat near a Forest Service gate on a desolate road that led even deeper into the wilderness. Snowbanks surrounded the vehicle, but not enough to trap it. Investigators were puzzled. The car had been driven with care. No dents, no undercarriage damage, no signs of reckless driving. Someone knew how to handle the terrain. Yet, that fact only raised more questions. Inside, police found the wrappers from the snacks purchased in Chico. A few maps, a program from the game, but no signs of struggle, no blood, no weapons, and no indication of panic. What was missing were the keys and the people. Strangely, a forest ranger later remarked that the car could have been easily pushed out of the shallow snowbank by 5 grown men. Yet it appeared they hadn't even tried. There were no signs of spinning tires, no attempts at digging out. It was as if the car had been intentionally abandoned. Even more unsettling was the fact that the group had passed several occupied areas, service stations, cabins, before reaching this point. If they were lost, why hadn't they stopped to ask for directions? If they were running from something, what was it? Local law enforcement considered several possibilities: car trouble, a wrong turn, or even fear of being followed. But each theory clashed with the available evidence. The group had no reason to be in that region. They had no known connections to the area, and it was unlikely that all 5, including those with cognitive impairments, would have collectively decided to hike into snow-covered woods at midnight. A few days later, a man named Joseph Shans came forward. On the same night, the group vanished. Shans had driven up that very road and become stuck. He claimed to have seen or heard people nearby. Flashlights, voices, a group he believed to be men and a woman. He called for help, but got no response. Was it them, or someone else entirely? Whatever happened next, the 5 left the car behind. What awaited them deeper in the forest would remain hidden, until the spring thaw revealed fragments of the truth. In the days following the car's discovery, search efforts intensified. Helicopters scanned the mountainous terrain. Foot teams, dogs, and snowmobiles combed the region. But the forest was vast, the snow deep, and the weather unforgiving. Each search attempt was hampered by the conditions. Snowdrifts buried trails. Temperatures plunged at night. The area near the car was so remote that even experienced outdoorsmen rarely ventured there in winter. 4 or 5 men, none dressed for hiking or the cold, survival chances were slim. But no footprints were found near the vehicle, none leading in any direction. This puzzled investigators. Had the falling snow erased them? Or had the men been picked up, taken somewhere? Adding to the strangeness, no logical destination was nearby. The road the car was found on led only to unmaintained forest land, cabins, and closed service areas. No one lived nearby in winter. No functioning buildings were within walking distance. Weeks passed. Not a single clue surfaced. No new sightings. No communications. No trace of movement beyond the abandoned Montego. Families grew desperate. Flyers were distributed. Interviews were conducted. But leads turned cold almost as quickly as they came in. Authorities considered the possibility of foul play, but there were no signs of struggle, no witnesses, and no clear motive. The case entered a liminal space, somewhere between a missing persons file and an unsolved mystery. As March turned to April, and April to May, the weight of silence grew heavier. Then, in June, a group of motorcyclists passing through the mountains made a gruesome discovery. It was more than 20 miles from the Montego, in a place no one expected. The silence had been broken, not by answers, but by more questions. On June 4th, 1978, nearly 4 months after the Yuba County Five vanished, a group of motorcyclists exploring remote backroads near Oroville made a disturbing find. They came across a small, abandoned Forest Service trailer tucked deep in the woods, more than 20 miles from where the Mercury Montego had been discovered. The trailer was located at the end of a rough, snow-blocked road leading to a seasonal campsite. Inside, the air was still, quiet, and then one of them saw it. The body of Ted Weiher lay on a bed inside the trailer, wrapped tightly in 8 sheets. His shoes were missing. His feet were severely frostbitten. His beard had grown long, something his family noted, as he usually kept it trimmed. But it was the autopsy that startled investigators most. Weiher had likely survived up to 13 weeks after the night they went missing. His cause of death was ruled as hypothermia and starvation. Despite being inside the trailer, which had heating, clothing, and a storage room full of food, none of it had been used properly. Dozens of ration cans had been opened, but most of the food supplies, including sealed dehydrated meals, remained untouched. A butane tank for heat was never activated, though it was functional. Someone had lit candles. Someone had wrapped Weiher's body. Someone had likely been with him during at least part of his slow decline. This trailer wasn't stumbled upon by chance. Reaching it in deep winter would have required hiking through snow, up and down steep mountain terrain for nearly 20 miles without snow gear or preparation. Nearby, searchers found personal items indicating the other men had been there too. Gary Mathias's tennis shoes were in the trailer, placed neatly beside the bed. Weiher had been wearing Mathias's shoes, suggesting Mathias may have walked out into the snow at some point. But if the group had found shelter, food, and heat, why had Weiher died alone, slowly, with no effort to save himself? And where were the others? More questions would be answered, but not resolved in the days that followed. The inside of the trailer, where Ted Weiher died, presented a confounding scene. On the surface, it looked like shelter had been found. Solid walls, a roof, and a locked door. But upon closer inspection, nothing about the environment made sense. There was no sign of forced entry, yet the trailer was used. The window had been broken to get inside, but otherwise, the structure was intact. There was ample food, canned meals, dehydrated rations, and boxes labeled for emergency use. Enough to keep all 5 men alive for weeks, possibly longer. And still, Ted Weiher starved. Someone had opened about a dozen cans of rations, evidence that at least one person knew how to use a military-style P-38 can opener. That detail pointed directly to Gary Mathias, the one member of the group with military experience. His presence was further confirmed by the shoes left behind, his well-worn sneakers, carefully placed near the cot. Weiher was wearing them, despite the pair being too large for his feet. It suggests a deliberate exchange. Perhaps Mathias had ventured out, leaving his shoes to someone staying behind. Yet no note was left. No writing. No indication of what happened after. The butane heater sat idle. It was full and working, but had never been used. The Forest Service stocked extra clothing and matches. None had been touched. A closet full of winter coats was ignored. Instead, Weiher lay under sheets, slowly wasting away. His body showed signs of extreme starvation. He had lost between 80 and 100 pounds, and gangrene had set in on his feet. The bedding was tucked around him with care, suggesting someone had wrapped him post-mortem or in his final hours. But if Mathias left in search of help, Why didn't he return? If others were with them, where did they go? Searchers speculated that the men had reached the trailer together, possibly seeking shelter from a worsening storm. Some may have panicked and left. Others stayed, but the behavior observed inside, not eating available food, not using heat, raised new concerns. Had mental confusion set in due to cold, or were they so unfamiliar with their surroundings they didn't realize help was within reach? The trailer, rather than offering closure, presented a chilling contradiction, a space that could have saved lives. Instead became a quiet tomb, and outside, the forest still held more answers. With the trailer now a confirmed waypoint in the group's final movements, searchers expanded their grid. Soon, the rest of the story began to emerge, but not in full and not all at once. Roughly 11 miles from the trailer, searchers discovered the remains of Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling. Their bodies were found on opposite sides of a nearby dirt road about 5 miles from the Montego. Both had succumbed to exposure. Their remains were in poor condition, scattered, partially consumed by wildlife. Investigators noted that the men likely died the same night they left the car or shortly after. The path they followed raised more questions. The terrain between the car and the trailer was steep, treacherous, and snow-covered. And yet, they had attempted it on foot in the dark with no winter gear. A short time later, Jack Hewitt's backbone was found about 2 miles northeast of the trailer. His shoes and parts of his body were nearby, but the cause of death was unclear due to decomposition. Like the others, he had no winter supplies, no flashlight, no tools. Each discovery painted a picture of fragmentation, of men possibly together, then scattered. Some may have turned back early. Others pushed forward, but none had communicated. None had reached help. Notably, all remains were found in a line leading back toward the car, but none made it all the way. They had come heartbreakingly close to retracing their steps. They knew, at some point, where the vehicle was, but something kept them from reaching it. And still, Gary Mathias remained missing. Only his shoes, left in the trailer, indicated that he had survived at least part of the journey. But whether he died somewhere deeper in the woods, or found a way out and vanished into society, no trace of him has ever surfaced. For the families, the discoveries offered confirmation, but not closure. The strange distribution of remains, the unexplained decisions, and the absence of final messages turned grief into confusion. And for investigators, a case that seemed closer to resolution suddenly felt further than ever. Of the 5 men who disappeared that night, Gary Mathias remains the only one never found. His case is perhaps the most complex. Unlike the others, Mathias did not have an intellectual disability. He had served in the Army but was later discharged due to a diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia. Under medication and close supervision, he had been stable for over 2 years. He lived with his parents, held part-time jobs, and had been integrated back into daily life. He was also familiar with the outdoors. Family members described him as physically capable, mentally sharp when medicated, and possessing enough survival knowledge to manage basic challenges. He knew how to use a can opener. He knew how to navigate terrain. In fact, his military-issued sneakers were found inside the trailer, next to Ted Weiher's body. That detail continues to fuel speculation. Did Mathias voluntarily remove his shoes and give them to Weiher? Was he the one who opened the food cans, wrapped Weiher in sheets? And if so, where did he go afterward? Authorities believe Mathias may have left the trailer alive, perhaps in search of help. But despite extensive searches, no further trace of him was ever located. No clothing, no remains, no confirmed sightings. His history complicated matters. Some theorized he had experienced a psychotic episode and fled into the forest. Others believed he may have reached a road, been picked up, and started a new life. Over the years, scattered reports of sightings came in, from California to Florida, but none were verified. In the absence of answers, Mathias became a cipher in the story. His disappearance blurred the lines between victim, survivor, and possible witness. Had he been the leader, or the one most likely to survive? The forest gave back fragments of 4 lives, but held one tightly. And after more than 4 decades, Gary Mathias's fate remains one of the most enduring mysteries in the case of the Yuba County Five. As the details of the Yuba County Five emerged, so did the theories, each one attempting to explain the inexplicable. No single explanation fits all the facts. Instead, the case sits at the uncomfortable intersection of logic, fear, and the unknown. Theory 1. Simple misadventure, the most conservative theory, suggests the group simply got lost. After the basketball game, they may have taken a wrong turn and ended up far into unfamiliar territory. Perhaps the car became stuck, and in an attempt to find help, they walked into the forest. But this theory struggles to explain why they drove so far into the mountains, away from any known route home. It also doesn't account for their lack of survival behavior in the trailer. Food, heat, and clothing were all available, but ignored. These were not reckless young men. They were cautious, routine-bound, and known to avoid unfamiliar situations. Theory 2. Mental health and panic. Some suggest that a psychological episode, perhaps from Gary Mathias, could have triggered a chain of poor decisions. If he experienced a schizophrenic break, could he have convinced the others they were in danger, or that they had to flee? This theory hinges on Mathias's influence, assuming the others followed his lead out of loyalty or fear. But it's important to note, Mathias had been stable, medicated, and trusted. There was no prior history of violence or delusional behavior involving harm to others. And even if he had panicked, why would the entire group follow him into the snow? Theory 3. Foul play. Others believe the group encountered someone or something that scared them into fleeing. The account by Joseph Shans, who claimed to have seen a group near the same road the night they vanished, suggests there were others in the area. He even reported seeing flashlights and hearing voices. But no physical evidence of an outside threat was found. No signs of a struggle. No motive for harm. The theory remains speculative, supported only by the absence of reason in the other theories. Theory 4. American Dyatlov. The nickname American Dyatlov comes from a 1959 Soviet case where 9 hikers died under strange and unexplained circumstances in the Ural Mountains. Both cases involve seemingly irrational behavior, extreme cold, and unexplained deaths. In both, experienced rescuers were baffled by the decisions the victims made. But the comparison only goes so far. The Yuba County Five were not hikers or campers. They were men on a short trip to a basketball game, in no way prepared for the terrain they entered. In the end, each theory addresses part of the story, but none explain it all. Something caused 5 men to abandon a car, walk 20 miles into snow-covered wilderness, ignore shelter provisions, and die in isolation. What that something was remains undefined. And perhaps that's the most haunting part of all. Decades have passed since 5 men from Yuba County vanished into the Sierra Nevada foothills, for were found, scattered, emaciated, or consumed by the elements. One remains missing, and none have offered answers. The case is still officially unsolved. Theories abound, from tragic missteps to sinister intervention, but no conclusive evidence has ever emerged. No note, no final words, no thread that ties it all together. The Yuba County Five are remembered not just for their disappearance, but for how their story lingers in the space between logic and uncertainty. Each clue raises more questions. Each body, when found, only deepened the mystery. Why abandon a car that still worked? Why trek into the snow without supplies? Why not use the resources that were within reach? These are not questions with easy answers, and perhaps they never will be. In many ways, the story mirrors Dyatlov, not in terrain or geopolitics, but in feeling. Both cases resist closure. Both chill not because of what is seen, but what remains hidden. Both remind us that sometimes, even in our modern world, people can simply vanish into the woods and never come out the same. So what do you think of today's video? Do you have something you want us to feature next? Tell us in the comments. It will also mean a lot to us if you like and subscribe. Close the book if you can. This is Black Chapter.